Hello, everyone, and welcome to Oh My Gosh podcast number 8 of Everlast Adventures, the creation of Everlast. So, welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Dane. I am also one of the player characters, Yuki Mistletoe, who is a bard character, sword dance or blade dancer character, which is one of the unique classes of Everlast. And of course, as always, we're joined by the creator of Everlast, Kyle. So, hello, Kyle.
How's it going, everybody? Glad to be here. Episode 8, crazy, and I can't believe we're already on sessions 15. Past session 15.
Yeah, 16 coming up soon. It's insane. Yeah, but I mean, just I hope you've been well, Kyle. I mean, it's starting to get real cold here in Japan.
Yeah, especially up in Akita, but here in Tokyo, it's been pleasant. Couple rainy days, but yeah, I think it's gonna still continue to be relatively mild here. A little bit colder, but.
Speaking of which, in the time of filming this, currently, it's the first snowfall of the year here in Akita. It is falling outside, so little chilly. It's that time of year where you just need to bundle up, do preventative measures for the cold and other pesky things, and just ride out the winter.
For sure.
Exactly. So,
yeah, this will be my first winter where I don't experience snow. Probably
true.
Being from Colorado, where we get snow, and I know Colorado's already gotten a few snowfalls up until this point. But yeah, here in especially the Kanto area in Japan, it doesn't get like hardly any snowfall. It's news if you get an inch or two.
Can I just come live with you throughout the rest of the winter and just not have to deal with it?
Then that's the crazy thing, because then you have Akita and Aomori, which are like the snowiest places on Earth.
Yeah, and it's not that far. Like, if you take a Shinkansen bullet train from Akita to Tokyo, it's only a 4-hour, it's like 3 hours and 59-minute bullet train, and about
hour and 15-minute flight.
Yeah, an hour and 15-minute flight, and about an hour of that train ride anyways, you're going normal train speed through Akita, because again, it's so mountainous, you can't go full bullet train speed. So technically, if you went as fast as a bullet train typically goes, it'd be quicker than that, so it's
easy.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. But yeah, well, you know what, I just have to suffer, and you know what, let's talk a little bit about Everlast. Let's enjoy the nice island life of Aishin Island, and
Aishin Island, where like it's been abnormally hot lately.
Yes.
So summertime.
Well, now that session 15 happened and we got into the Gold Draken City of Flomberge. It is roll hot. It is a toasty one. It's a volcano city, so it makes sense. But I guess without further ado, Kyle, let's just get into some of the legal disclaimers and everything about this.
Absolutely. So Fantasy Forge Studios and Kyle LaFont owns all of the intellectual properties, art, music, anything that you see on stream, videos, that kind of stuff. That is involved in the creation of this game. We're bringing it to you early, so each and every one of you can get excited for it before the official release. That being said, feel free to use it for your own homebrew stuff, but do not claim that it is yours. So
cool. All right. Well, with that being said, I do want to say this is a podcast that is exclusively played right now on our YouTube channel, so our Fantasy Forge Studios YouTube channel. So obviously, if you're watching it, you're watching on our YouTube channel. If you have not caught up on the past adventures of Session 14 and Session 15, and you desire to do so before you listen to this podcast, this is a good place to stop that and go back and listen to both Sessions 14 and 15. Or, you know what? You can have the Reader's Digest version of it and then go back and listen to it with our commentary on it. So either or,
absolutely.
I think they work well. But I guess without further ado, Kyle, let's just dive right into it. So Session 14. So this was a unique session because, again, unfortunately, we didn't have many of our party members with us. However, I feel like some important things happened. So to put things in perspective, it was just Zill, who is played by Max, and then Yuki, who's played by me, and then obviously the Fate Weaver. All the other guys were unfortunately busy in their lives, and so they couldn't join us that week. But Kyle, do you want to go a little bit into just a general overview of Session 14 itself and what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So Session 14, this was one of those where it was in the middle of the holiday phase that Eklos was taken. And one of the things in Everlast that parties are able to do is obviously holiday actions and all that kind of stuff, but provide opportunities for role play, and holiday phases are a really good time in order to progress story. Because I think the way that the each adventure is built up is supposed to kind of be how do I explain it? Like kind of like the beginning of a quest, and then obviously at the end you have the holiday phase where it wraps it up. And so the holiday phase itself, especially at the end of a quest, is a good place to be able to, you know, bring up some plot hooks, that kind of stuff. And so in this session 14, Eklos Eos, at least the two players that we had, picked up on some of those plot hooks where they were taking their time doing vacation, and they were summoned by the council at Takai Town, just a little bit curious about, you know, Smoldran, who for those of you who don't know, and it was literally, I think, the last session that the group played before the official live broadcasted events. And so those of you here probably wouldn't remember, but as far as the party knows, upon arrival to Takai Town in Aishin Island, there was a great red dragon who flew out of the top of Aishin Volcano and disappeared off into the distance. That was pretty much all that was said about that, and just kind of left at that. And so the party, they did a bunch of things on the island, and obviously Jungle Keep. And
we met some characters like Anders, the assistant to what's her name? I forget her name. Yeah, the assistant, and he seemed mysterious. Yeah, Malaziark. He seemed mysterious, and he seemed like a buccaneer of sorts, but a very polite buccaneer, at least to Malaziark.
Yeah, definitely. Anders, he's an interesting character. So as mentioned and as hinted at in the session, that he is the person who's responsible for helping to create the big map, like very, very detailed maps that the Takai Town residents have. And so he's a navigator primarily.
Well,
and
maybe Thordane should help him, because Thordane did that during his holiday phase. I mean, you'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but they should get into cahoots, because, you know, that's two peas of pod right there.
Absolutely. And so yeah, that was quite interesting. But Anders, yeah, he is basically the right hand man to Malaziark, and so he was tasked with the duty of accompanying and helping to direct the small crew with Zil and Yuki to Terabay Island, where rumors had that Smoldran had made roost. And so they basically were brought over there to just discover what is Smoldran doing there. Why hasn't he returned, as it's been like a little over a month since he's flown away, and yeah, what's the reason behind that? And so there's a lot of things in this specific session that kind of, as far as story progression, really I think is starting to introduce the Draken culture that lives on this island, but how the dragons and their relationship with the Draken are as well, and also kind of you know, hinting at the, you know, the greater problems that are happening within the whole like Aishin archipelago chain that are there. And as Eklos Eos had already experienced, there was an earth elemental that was down below Terabay Islands that pretty much was corrupting the earth crystal. And so they arrived, and they were able to speak a little bit with Smoldran. And
the two characters in the party who speak Draken.
Yeah, that's true.
Which
that worked out.
Yeah. So even Zil could understand, which is nice.
Exactly. And for example, let's just say like a party doesn't have a character, and this is kind of one of the elements that you can have. Let's just say characters don't speak Draken, like nobody in a party. It's like, how do you talk to a dragon? Well, actually, kind of a little behind the scenes, but Anders is the solution to that. Anders can speak Draken, and so he can act as, I mean, he's brought along with, and he stayed back with the boat because obviously they were more than prepared, but he has the ability to converse with Smoldran as well. So
quick question about dragons themselves. So are they such prideful beings that even if they know Everspeech, which is the common tongue in Everlast, they just refuse to use it? Is it just like, I'm just only going to use Draken, or do they just not even know any other language besides their home tongue?
It depends on the dragon.
Okay. Smoldran, kind of like Smoldran's the son of the big dragon on the island, right? Nazrahim.
Yeah.
So
So one of interesting thing about dragons in Everlast is all of them in some way are descendants of the four main dragons,
Mm.
and Nazrahim is one of those. So since basically the dawning of Everlast, Nazrahim has existed. They're immortal creatures that until destroyed, they just keep getting older and older and gaining more knowledge, more wealth, that kind of stuff. And so Nazrahim is still alive, and he's been having children through the years. Obviously, the dragons don't stay with their parents for the long term, and so they tend to fly away, either causing problems or just kind of keeping to themselves. But none are as old as Nazrahim and his siblings. In that matter.
Quick
So
question: do
yes.
the silver dragon have a patriarch dragon? I guess in a sense.
Yeah, they do. So it's a dragon by the name of Kalisha, and so she's a silver dragon that lives up north in the Rayla tundra.
Okay.
And so Yuki would know about her.
Yeah. Obviously,
and
probably hasn't met her, but
no. Actually, so with Yuki being from Flamongolith, there probably would have been no solutions unless she was a traveler or actually went out to seek her.
Okay.
To have any encounters with Kalisha.
Gotcha.
So
Okay. Sorry, that was just an aside, but Nazrahim being the gold dragon, I guess
Nazrahim.
patriarch. Yeah, Nazrahim. But Smoldran, he's the child of Nazrahim, and he's the one who went to this island to do some shenanigans. I know, like, when we arrived there, we were trying to find out what he was doing himself, and I mean, we found out that he was after some sort of evil item, and an evil item that even Zill and Yuki were able to kind of feel and decipher that this is not a good item itself. And I'm still questioning our antics and our tactic when we went there. I don't know if what we did was the actual good thing, but also at the same time, Nazrahim could have eaten us. So now Nazrahim, Smoldron could have eaten us. So
you're questioning your tactics as what?
As in, like, giving the rope to him. So sorry, spoiler alert, guys. We gave the rope to him because he asked for it. So just by that, I don't know. Who knows if we did something bad, but I guess we'll find out later on.
Well, this is actually I think a good place to talk about it. But from the mind of Yuki, and obviously we can't really speak for Zill specifically, but like, what were your thoughts like in your mind while you were making this encounter while you were going through it? I mean, so right off the bat, I guess one question that I could ask you is what was Yuki's impression of Smoldran? And then obviously you were a little bit kind of hesitant about maybe doing this, but what ultimately helped you make the decision to go fetch this and actually trade it? I think, for example, in Zill, and again, I could be completely wrong, but he seemed pretty fascinated with the treasure and just fascinated with Smoldran in general, just being a dragon.
I mean, he kept also appealing to the fact that he's a blacksmith and he loves like the fire that the gold dragon can make and whatnot. Actually, like, Zill came in super clutch when it came to some of like the diplomacy that we had with Smoldran. I feel like if Yuki was the one talking, we may not have gotten it quite as good of a reception, but freaking
that's
Zill.
that's why having a party, I think, is so good. I mean, obviously you have Yuki, who is like the super high charisma, but the bard of the party. But I think one thing that people don't understand, and what I think is part of what makes like a role-playing game fun, is the idea to actually role play. It's like, yeah, you might be able to, like, in a diplomacy, roll super high, that's just like, okay, like, you get along somehow. But being able to have like different perspectives, and especially coming from your own character's backgrounds, you might have different ways to interact with them. Or like, obviously Zill was very excited about the prospect of meeting a dragon that resides in like the city that is like known for blacksmithing. So that's a new element that he brought to the table. But Yuki also having the element too, where like she knows of dragons, she knows dragon culture, and like her way of being able to pick up and kind of like schmooze him a little bit.
Yeah, well, as best as I could. I mean, that was the one thing I was going to say when you asked about Yuki's impression. I know I spent a good, like, 10 minutes just even above game talking to you about dragons and Everlast themselves. And so I guess before we get into Yuki's thoughts behind it, I was just really curious because in fantasy, oftentimes dragons are considered to be these tyrants who are just treasure hungry, and they don't have any consideration for anyone other than themselves and their own self preservation. And so that was my big thing, was just wondering if dragons and Everlast are the same. Like, do they have the same kind of connotation? I know they're super old and they've been here since the dawning of Everlast, but like, how does that work? Because I know that I was asking you about that. So because obviously this would be something that Yuki would know going into it. So
yeah, so some of my inspiration for the dragon obviously comes from Tolkien a little bit. Although in Tolkien's world, dragons are primarily evil. They're greedy people. In fact, there's even like this idea that like Thorin and even like his grandfather fell under this idea of like dragon sickness, where it's just like the primary kind of characteristic of dragon is their greed, and they just want to amass power and wealth. And so there's elements of that in the dragons, and throughout Everlast's history and how the dragons work is they still are tempted by all that. And so like part of it has been influenced, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're evil. Where in, for example, Tolkien's world, you have Glamdorong, who is one of the very first dragons created by Morgoth, and he was basically this tyrant, this prideful tyrant that, you know, went and just like deceived people and like was like super cunning and all that kind of stuff. And again, those elements exist in the dragons that are in Everlast, but unlike Tolkien, dragons aren't necessarily bad, and partially it's because they are immortal and they've been able to see how things change. So like, yes, they're great, they're strong, they're powerful, but they also see that like through the ticket of time, that as like you know, kingdoms have risen and fallen, and like the different things that have happened, like they grow respect for other kinds of power. And I think especially for like Smoldran's case, he knew about like the Order of Amandalius, where it's like you have this ancient order that like believes and worships Alamnia, and so like obviously he's aware, but whether he believes or not is, you know, a question. But he also recognizes like the difference between good and evil. Like he recognizes that in general Alamnia has a lot of power, and he fights for good, where for example Malvish on the other hand, and like this corrupted rope is evil power, and he sees that like even that evil power could, you know, corrupt someone as great as him. And so yeah, it's just one of those things where the dragons know, and based off of their experiences that they have, Smoldran's a young dragon, but based off of the experiences that they have, the story, the lore from parents, that kind of stuff, they can kind of figure out their own way. And so I think the best answer to that is dragons are very neutral creatures. They can be evil and they can be really good. But the vast majority of them are going to be neutral until their lived experience turns them one way or another.
Gotcha. And I mean, that's the kind of the thing, and that's what you ultimately told me. And again, it's just, I think my own specific prejudices of dragons and other fantasy coming into it. Like, I as a person was very, very skeptical about Smoldran. I think Max did a great job playing Zill that way, but for me, when you ask about Yuki, I think ultimately she wouldn't have been that way. I think she would have seen that respect. And you kind of see that too. For example, he was willing to exchange like a legendary bowstring, a celestial bowstring, for this rope. So it's not like he was just take.
Well, and even something that he mentioned where it was his favorite and most prized of the Nazrahim treasure hoard.
Exactly. And so just by the fact that that was able to be there, I kind of felt that like he's not necessarily evil. I mean, I still question it because again, he's a young dragon. He's got a lot of life left to live, and who knows how he'll turn. But even like the residents of Takai Town, and when we mentioned it in session 15 to what's her name? Not Sinzirak. What's her name?
Malaziark.
Malaziark. Like everyone seems just super like suspicious of the dragons themselves. Like we were sent to go investigate it. Even any mention of Smoldran and Nazrahim, for example, Krothos and the king Nalgoric of Flomberge, just all seemed very concerned and like have a little bit of a tenuous relationship with the dragons themselves. And that might have many reasons. Obviously that hasn't been revealed to us, and I'm not expecting you to reveal anything right now. But there does still seem to be a little bit of like a tenuous relationship in some form or another, right? When it comes to dragons and how they relate to people. But I guess without spoiling too much, is there anything you can tell us about Draken themselves, in particular Gold Draken and Gold Dragons, the relationship between those two, or without spoiling anything? Is there anything to talk about as far as that goes?
Yeah, and so I would say, being kind of the protectors of the Flame Pillar and of Aishin Volcano, they have a relationship with Nazrahim specifically. Not necessarily Smoldran. Obviously, they like know enough about the dragon to be a little bit worried. And one of the things that I think a lot of people, again, without diving too much into it, where a lot of the apprehension about Smoldran leaving and not coming back is the idea of a couple of things. Maybe one, something might be wrong in Aishin Volcano for him to go away. Like, for example, Nazrahim could be really upset. I mean, father daddy issues, like that kind of stuff, or daddy child issues. Or on the other hand, it could be, you know, him going and like it being tyrannical, doing that kind of stuff. But I think the primary concern is like there's this great creature, a dragon, that's gone off and is doing something that no one can predict what they're doing. And so just by nature of like something that has so much power, going off and being unpredictable, that can be a little bit scary in itself. So I think a lot of their concerns were based off of that. And obviously they had seen kind of the prowess and power taking care of Amios. And although that was going on there, that, you know, you guys could be good people to look into it. Not necessarily expecting you to fight off the dragon, but like if things did turn south, like you probably would have the best chance of anybody to survive.
Exactly. And I think, you know what, I wanted to talk a little bit about this in session 15 itself, but I think this is actually a really good opportunity to talk about now that we're talking about Gold Draken and how they relate to their forefathers, the Gold Dragons, right? So what can you tell us about how Draken are created, like each of the cultures? Like in what way are Draken descendants of dragons in Everlast?
Absolutely. So actually this is a really, I think, good and important thing. And if you you know, have the adventure book and region guides and stuff for Aishin Island, one thing that you'll know is, and it's things that have been revealed thus far, is Aishin Island, specifically Flomberge, is the cradle of civilization. And so throughout history it's changed the city itself, but it started out as one of the very first human settlements, a place named Ashalanthil. And so Ashalanthil, it was this great city that had existed throughout that first age when, you know, people were being, you know, created, multiplying, spreading throughout all of the continents, throughout all of Everlast. And Ashalanthil had always been one of those cities that it was like kind of the great cities. Like you think like back in like early history, like you would think of Rome or like Egypt. It's like somewhere that like people knew and respected, and it had a relatively big populace compared to a lot of the places throughout the rest of the world. And so the very first of Alamnia's creation were humans. There weren't any other races or anything that were created. Like his primary creation were humans. And so it's really interesting how that relationship happened. And so he also created dragons as well, but he created dragons as beasts to inhabit the lands, where he created human beings, which were his greatest creation, to inherit the land. Does that make sense? And so one of the things that ended up happening is, obviously, as humans, as they go about their lives and, you know, they seek for survival and to do certain things, they saw, you know, wow, look at the power of these great beasts. So much so to the point where they began worshiping them. There was definitely some underlying evil, some underlying shadow from the work of Malvish, and particularly in kind of trying to influence the dragons and like build them up to be these creatures that are great and greater than the people that Alamnia created. And, you know, kind of almost obvious that the demon in their ear where it's just like whispering lies of deceit, and it's just like, you should be so much greater. I mean, look at you, you are so much greater.
So Malvish would be the one who'd be considered the one who gives the dragon sickness to the dragons in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like what he does for the rest. It's not necessarily because they're specifically, I mean, it's not just a traits that you get off just based off of your genetics, and you know, it's just like, you know, your fight or flight instincts and that kind of stuff. It's they're very much influenced by evil as well. They are creatures of intellect, but they're also, I mean, they're immortal, but they're not creatures of soul. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Totally understand.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. So the humans had that higher intellect, and so one of actually the biggest conflicts in the first age was kind of the people who were loyal to Alamnia, and then those who worshipped the great dragons. And so there were many wars and everything. And so for example, at the very end of that conflict, there were only a few dragons that actually remained, but these dragons were the ones that were of the greatest worship. And so the Flame Pillar and where Aishin Volcano is, that was actually the home to Nazrahim. And so there was actually a great civilization that was built there, Ashalanthil, and those humans. And at the very conclusion of that, eventually the humans triumphed over these dragon cultists. And in order to reward those that you know, fought for the side of Alamnia actually granted them extended life, and actually that's how the elven race was made.
And so those who lost the dragon cultists became Draken then?
Yeah, so the ones who prevailed were blessed with like elongated life, and actually features of the Serac, which are godly angelic type creatures, and that's why elves are what they are. And then on the other hand, you had those, and instead of just killing everyone, he was merciful. Alamni was merciful, but he also inflicted upon them a curse that they would be forced to carry with them as a basically a reminder that, you know, you don't turn against Alamni. And it was a curse out of love. Obviously, he could have just like annihilated them. And actually, I think before anyone gets too confused, it's actually very similar to human beings and how we are today. With you know, in the Catholic faith and Christian faith, we believe in this thing called original sin. And so original sin, Adam and Eve in the garden, they sinned, they turned against God, and thus original sin was born. And so people are born into the world in Christianity with this stain from the original fall. And so that Draken curse is kind of akin to that. It's not like, oh, these people are horrible and you should look terrible on them, where there's always like hope that exists. And obviously there's been great heroes throughout the years that have been Draken. And so it's how you live your life. And obviously in Christianity, one way to remove that is baptism. And then of course, throughout your sacramental life, the ability to go to reconciliation and that kind of stuff. But the Draken, they were cursed, but they were cursed with a physical likeness to the dragons which they worshipped. And so you have obviously the four cultures, and so you have Silver Draken, Gold Draken, Black Draken, and then Bronze Draken. And so they're spread throughout Everlast, and they, you know, obviously still have that curse upon them. And then the humans themselves, the ones that still remain human throughout the years were those who were on different continents throughout the world. And so the world that were not involved. And so the humans that you actually see in Everlast today, for example, Zil, are people from neighboring continents that eventually migrated over.
Gotcha.
So they weren't involved in the conflict at all. They were kind of like that neutral position. And then they came, and that's how humans were able to, you know, still be humans. It wasn't just humans and then elves and then Draken were created and then nothing else. And obviously other things happened with some of the other cultures and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm assuming the Glyvins and the fairies are also migratory from other places as well.
They are. They are.
Cool. Well, hey, I mean, that was a really good in-depth look at the Draken, which I appreciate. Obviously, Yuki being a Draken herself, it's great to find out a little bit more about the history of it. And when the actual source material comes out, guys, you'll have access to every single part of what Kyle's talking about right now. So feel free to read up on it as you want. However, I do want to talk a little bit about like the actual quest itself. So the thing that Smoldron was searching for when he went to the Earth Pillar, one of the many pillars of the creation of Everlast, right? Was he was searching for this cursed item. It was this silver and gold rope that he explained a little bit about. It reminds me a little bit of the rope that goes around Gollum's neck in the Lord of the Ring.
Yeah, the elven rope
The
from
elven rope.
Galadriel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it burns, it freezes. Yeah, that kind of thing. Like, it can control people. Basically, like, if it gets put around you, there's no way to break out of it kind of thing. Like, it's a cursed item. It's cursed? I don't know if it's cursed, but it's an evil item. But we were sent in there. Obviously, Nazrahim, being a big old, thick boy dragon, was unable to actually get inside the doorway where it came from. But one thing that we had encountered before we actually started streaming Everlast, we had actually encountered the Earth Pillar, and we visited there before. And we actually fought an Earth Elemental that was creating like bad juju at the Earth Pillar, basically, with a bunch of goblins, that kind of stuff. But one thing was, you mentioned that there was this Order of Amandalius who's supposed to be there protecting the Earth Pillar itself, and obviously goblins had completely taken over it. And when we got inside the volcano, at this point, no one had known what had happened to the Order of Amandalius. If all everyone knew is that they were still there preserving the Earth Pillar, right? Like, no one had any idea besides Eklos Eos going into there. But I know that was one thing, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we encountered some goblins, obviously, looking for this treasure, and there were some interesting ones for sure. I know Yuki having Zill and Yuki going in there and just failing all of their stealth checks, you know, it's gonna happen. But we encountered some pretty strong goblins, for goblins at the very least. I mean, thank goodness we had Zill and like someone as tanky as Zill and someone as DPS-y as Yuki in there, because that could have been rough. Absolutely.
Yeah, it could have been tough. And obviously obviously I cranked up a little bit of the challenge for you guys, but you know, I didn't have to work as hard in doing that specifically because it was just two of you. And so you know, a lot of this, especially from what you guys are seeing, is there's also that very real chance that, like, you know, the encounters that I create maybe are like too difficult. And so like there's the very, very real chance that characters can die. Obviously, we're still in play testing of Everlast in some of these encounters, and so it could have been far more challenging, especially with only the two players and without a healer. Fortunately, they were goblins, and the goblins themselves are not super duper strong.
They're fiendish, but they're not very they're not very threatening, I guess. Even the Goblin King,
not to level 7 adventurers. So.
Speaking of which, I'm just very curious. Did the Goblin King that we slayed have a sweet goiter?
Nah, he did not have a sweet goiter. He's not cool like that.
Dang it.
Yeah, I know. He was a little bit smaller and a little bit more dexterous than a nice Chungus Goblin King that you can think of.
From The Hobbit. Nice. Yep.
Yeah.
Good stuff. But yeah, we fought them. I mean, they were pretty challenging for goblins as far as they were. Like, we fought a Goblin King, and we also fought 4
Goblin champions.
Yeah. And the champions at the very least had a ton of armor, and I know the Goblin King. I know Yuki went for the Goblin King right away just because you go for the king first. You cut the king's head off, and hopefully the subjects bow before you, you know? But the Goblin King also did some crazy stuff too. Like, he had this freaking sword that just destroyed Yuki's armor. Oh, poor Yuki. It literally took like half of her armor value away by just getting hit by that thing over and over again. But yet other things too. And obviously the other goblins, the goblin champions, you said they were? Yeah, they were thick boys. Whew! They got some armor on them.
Yeah. Basically, so Goblin Champions are pretty much like the private guards to, like, a Goblin King. And so it makes sense that he would be surrounded by his best warriors. And as far as stat wise, like those are some of the better goblins. And they also synergize with each other. And so like there's a lot of stuff that the Goblin King does to be able to buff those guys while they're around him and everything. And so honestly, the fact that Yuki's thoughts about trying to take out the Goblin King, I think we're pretty good. Like, yeah, kill the leader and then scatter the rest of them. And so that was definitely a good thought for sure. When the Goblin King died, they definitely got weaker.
And then Zill came in, obviously, and at the very least, he couldn't hit water if he fell off a boat. I don't know what's up with that, but you know,
bad rolls.
Just the luck of the rolls, I guess. He was just rolling very poorly, but he was keeping them off of me, which was good. So I was not necessarily having to deal with too many, which is nice.
Exactly.
But yeah, basically we dispatched them. We found a key from some good investigation rolls, and unfortunately Yuki poisoned herself again, as she's notorious for doing so, to opening a door. And then we found the rope. We found the evil rope, and we actually took it to Nazrahim and gave it to him. And I know Zill had some conversation with him a little bit later.
Or Smoldran.
Sorry, not Nazrahim, Smoldran. Gave the ropes to them. Yuki feeling like she did what she was there for, went back, they reported, and I guess that takes us right into session 15, Kyle.
Session 15.
Session 15. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about as far as the rope and Smoldran before we move on?
I don't know. What are your thoughts on them?
I was sketched by it, honestly.
Sketched?
Personally, myself, I was sketched just because, again, I don't trust dragons, because that's just me, like, as a person. But Yuki, I don't think was fine. She was fine. She was unfazed by it. She got a sweet bowstring from him, so she was happy about that. So she put it in the gloof bag. So it's pretty good.
Exactly.
It's pretty good.
And also one thing to note is at the conclusion of that, basically, Smoldran somewhat tasked Yuki and Zill with finding the Order of Amandalius, and Smoldran is basically claims that he's going to be at Terabay Island and protecting the island for the meantime. As far as that's concerned. And honestly, one of his and for those of you who are maybe a little confused about like why did he want this cursed item, like isn't that clearly like something that's like really sketchy? Why would you do that? Well, his reasoning behind it was he's a great powerful dragon, and he doesn't want that to be in the hands of weaker people who would use it in order to gain control of a creature as powerful and magnificent as him. And so by having it in his strong hands, weaker people won't be able to get it and use it against him, essentially.
Well, hey, it makes sense. It makes lots of sense. So, but yeah, I don't mind Smoldran. Like, after the encounter and stuff, I got a sweet bowstring. I personally think he's pretty cool. And I think we did a pretty good job with the diplomacy with him. And at the very least, hopefully we have a little bit of an ally. I don't know if he trusts us all that much, especially with Zill trying to take a scale off of him at the end of the session.
I would say more than anything, you probably went away, definitely not on bad terms, but he went away with him being at least somewhat amused by you, which... For better or for worse, I mean, that's better than being dead or ending up in his belly.
Yep, true. Very true. But yeah, we got back on the boat and we made our way back. And luckily on session 15, Belbin was able to join us. Connor was able to join us. And we did some holiday phase with him. So let's talk a little bit more about that holiday phase. I know one thing about Everlast that is very different from, say, Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder is the game itself, we've talked many times about, is split into different phases, like adventuring phases, holiday phases, dungeoning phases, all kinds of different phases, and they're very unique in a sense. But you talked a little bit about it at the beginning, how it's a good way to wrap things up, but it's also a good way to get things moving, but also tie up loose ends and
heal,
get the rewards that you so well deserve after a freaking massive dungeon that you just did. So for example, I think of Belbin, for example, like he literally just went on spa day. He literally just had spa day.
Yeah, because for him, one of his biggest concerns that he was dealing with is gaining points of misery, and he was pretty deep in vice too. And so that outside of even just healing like yourself physically, like you gain enough points of vice and like it could be game over for you. Like that's one way to lose your character. And so that was definitely something that was very needed for him. And so why he chose to, just try to remove some of that misery that he had accumulated throughout all the adventure, but, from that dungeon as well.
Well, and one thing I really do appreciate about Connor as well, and I guess this is really just dependent on the party and how they decide to play a holiday phase. Like, obviously, you have your holiday actions that you can do, but, like, the amount of role play that Connor does for not being, like, an actor or anything is just super amusing to me. Like, he just
Well, and it's cool because, like, he plays a character that's so different from himself.
Oh, my gosh. He's the complete opposite of Connor. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, he's one of the holiest men that I know, like one of the, and it's crazy because he just like plays like this scoundrel. And like, even it's so funny, even afterwards, without talking too much about private conversations, but even like after the sessions, we were talking a little bit about like Thordane, and he's just like, yeah, Jonathan's not here, why don't we just like kill Thordane off? And it's just like still being Belbin like on the afterwards. And so it's just like it's quite amusing just seeing the way that he plays him. Yeah.
But hey, he
plays him true to character. It's really nice. I think that's really difficult to do.
I agree, but one thing that makes it fun is like, especially for those of us like myself, yourself, Kyle, also Cole, even Max, like everyone comes from some sort of like an acting background, or at least we've done acting in the past, and we don't have any qualms about getting into the acting with it. Like Belbin does a great job setting everyone up for just really fun role play afterwards. For example, like he got all
keeps
nice
it from
and
being
groomed.
too predictable.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I mean, you can kind of predict Belbin a little bit, but not really. Like, you never get a
But
full
at the
grasp
same
on
time,
it.
too, it's not like, for example, you have an entire party of, I'll use D&D terms, like righteous paladins, that it's just like, everybody agrees, we're going to do everything for justice, and you go around and, like, it becomes super predictable. Yeah. Or when you have inside your own party kind of that juxtaposition, you don't know what they're going to do. Like, there are times, like obviously with Belbin, was just like he'll sometimes roll something and be like, okay, I'm good, like I won't do anything, or like sometimes he'll just go crazy. So it kind of just depends on how he wants to role play it. And also I know he utilizes dice when he can't make up his mind and actually doing that, so it's kind of a fun way to be able to see that role play. But the holiday phase is very much a way for him to be able, I think, it's a good way to have story progression too. Because one of the things that you can actually do on holiday phase is it's supposed to be like a good time to be able to like take that time to reflect. You're not worrying about, the issues of the world and like the concerns of that. You're more worried about the issues of yourself. And it kind of brings everything back to each individual, because they're all doing their own things, each player. Even though like you have, for example, like Zill and Yuki training together, like obviously you had that one idea where she went to go see Yukio and then Salik and all that kind of stuff, where Zill was looking to do his blacksmithing stuff. Like, it's ways to be able to build character story, and also for players to get to know their characters more and figure out like, this is how I want to play my character. Or changes in your character, like how has your character changed over the course of the past adventure that you had, like for good, for worse, but like it's the encounters that you're supposed to do like should change you as it would change you as a person.
Well, I mean, I would say one big thing with Yuki as far as this holiday phase that she's really taken advantage of, and I've been trying to push as much, is that little bit of growth in her. So without going into too much detail, I did reveal a little bit about Yuki's backstory in that, so go listen to the session to hear a little bit more about Yuki's backstory. But she had a really good friend back in the day who she adventured with, a bard friend, and as far as she knows, and he very well could just be completely dead, but he was, she's been without him, and she's kind of, up until this point, really been a character that has, how to say, she's been searching for her partner, but she's definitely like been the one who's been doted upon, she's the one who like, it was the Salik role, I guess, and this is the first time where she's kind of growing up a little bit. I mean, she's kind of young for a Draken as far as like Draken years go, and she doesn't have a ton of life experience. She has a decent amount of life experience compared to like someone like Zill, of course, but she's really starting to mature a little bit and kind of take on the role of her predecessor, and I guess like she used that with Salik himself, and I don't know if Salik ultimately will become like a prodigy of Yuki. I doubt it, honestly, but at the very least, he's a good stepping stone for her to be able to grow a little bit as a character herself, instead of being the one who's just not moping, but like just still in that lost state. She can really take that step forward and be a leader that she knows that, or she wants to be and she desires to be from.
Well, and it's nice natural growth too. I think especially when you're role playing, it's easy just to be like, hey, my character is this, and they're going to be like this for the entire campaign and the entire adventure. But that's not how humans are. That's not how we are in our day-to-day life. And I guess when you're role playing, you can do whatever you want with it. But I think it's very natural for someone who, you know, doesn't know anything to seek someone to be able to show them how to do things, how to live life. And then once you've accumulated those experiences, you become that for someone else.
Yeah.
And I think the perfect example is like parents and kids. Like you grow up being a child knowing nothing, your parents are guiding you. And then one day you become a parent and you have to do the same thing for your kids. You put yourself in the same shoes, and then it's just a cycle. Or even like teachers, for example. You know, there's all kinds of people in your life that have effects for you for better or for worse. And they help to shape the kind of person that you become and how you interact with other people.
True.
It builds those experiences. And so I think it's actually a very beautiful way to, you know, take backstory and be able to actually make it applicable. Why would Yuki care about this young boy? She sees a lot of herself in him, perhaps, but also like she can relate to him in like a lot of ways and help comfort him in that.
Of course. And it's funny just to look back of like when I first made Yuki as a character 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, can't believe how long she's been my character.
Like 2.5 years ago.
2.5 years ago. Oh my gosh, it's crazy just to think about. But she's a different character than when I first made her. Like when I first made her, I mean, this isn't giving too much away, I don't think. But my intention going into her, she's a character who's been scarred by the past, and shows she's very, not moody, but she definitely is more closed off, and it takes her a long while to like gain the trust of people. But quickly, as soon as Ecclesias formed, she started to open up a little bit more and more, and now she's really taken that step towards that kind of motherly role for the party. Obviously there's a lot of nonsense and shenanigans that goes on between each of the party members and the characters, but even being able to interact with the NPCs and stuff. And I think that's the wonderful thing about Everlast is the NPCs we've talked about before are very real, they're not just NPCs too. Like you can utilize them as ways to grow your characters, you know, as well. And I guess it just depends on the party and the Fate Weaver at the time, but I think it's wonderful. I love the holiday phases. I mean, this is technically our first real one, but I love the holiday phases partially just because it allows you to get a little bit of that growth after just like having 2 or 3 sessions, up to 5 sessions of just being in a dungeon and just fighting things, you know. Like it allows you to reflect on like the previous adventure, the previous dungeon, hopefully
build relationships, improve your character, do all kinds of things. Like again, the natural progression of what happens when you overcome a difficult experience. Like every adventure, like I don't know, like I think in a lot of like role-playing games, like there's always like the assumption that it's like quest after quest after quest after quest, like you never end. It's like every adventure needs some time to relax. Again, I hearken myself back to like Tolkien, but the Lord of the Rings. You have, yes, there was this one long adventure that they had, starting with Frodo in the Shire, going all the way to, you know, Mount Doom. But throughout that time, they had breaks. They, you know, took rest in Rivendell. They went to Lothlorien. There were times that like it took a long time, like over a period of 3 years, to be able to like finish like an entire quest. And during that time, like obviously the shadow was growing in Mordor, but like there was still the opportunity for them to heal their wounds, and that was kind of like a big thing. And you know, especially once you got into the Return of the King, is you had this, you know, Frodo was kind of losing himself because he had gone so long without a rest, and obviously he had this burden of the ring, where by the time he was able to complete his task and everything, like there was not enough of him left, you know, to like really get a lot out of, you know, his time in the Shire, hence going to the Grey Havens and going to the West.
Spoiler alerts, Kyle. Jeez.
Oh, sorry. My bad. But it's these things where there's this, if you keep on adventuring, you keep on doing these things. Hence Belbin, he was building misery, he was falling into vice. You keep that up for so long, you're going to lose yourself, you're going to lose your character. Every single character needs rest, and they need that time to be able to reflect and improve. So I think it's a very natural way to not only break up adventures, but to really keep your characters from becoming stagnant. My very first real experience, I guess it wasn't, actually it probably was my very first real experience with a game kind of like this, was playing Gloomhaven. And for those of you who know Gloomhaven, it's definitely more board game than it is role-playing game. And actually John, who plays Thordane, his dad started trying to do some role-play, and I remember sitting at the table being like, okay, this is like really weird. And his dad was super into it, being an actor in his previous days. But like literally in that game, all you do is like you take a card and it's just like, this is what happened on the road, and then how do you want to do this, what decisions do you want to make? And so it's more like just us talking like strategy, like, okay, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do this. And then eventually got to the point where we ended up just making a decision and going forward from there. And so like we weren't really super involved in the world per se, but the story did progress. And so you can play Everlast like that, but this provides a lot of opportunity for you to be able to do a lot more and feel more invested in the world, create the world around you, make it feel more real. And I think role-playing does a really good job at doing that as far as the story progression goes.
But that's the great thing about Everlast, is it gives you both opportunities to play as you want to, which is nice. So I know I wanted to say a little bit, it's a great way not only like to tie up those loose ends, of course, but it's just really fun too. Like after you just go through that entire dungeon where it can be, it's like, especially the one that we just went through, where it's just super depressing and like it's just like everything's your happiness is being sucked out of you, like being able to like
encounter after encounter after encounter.
Exactly, being able to just kind of relax and grow your character a little bit in that vacation time is also nice. In those holiday phases. So I agree. So I guess the big thing that happened in session 15 is the party went to Flumberge, which is the big gold dragon civilization at the base of Aishin Volcano. And we went with the big boy Krothos. Again, those of you who forgot or are unaware, he's the gold draken that we encountered in the forest jungle, or the jungle keep, I should say, with Amios's tutelage and whatnot. And he was not doing well, but we saved him from the keep. Luckily, he survived his way through, and he's proved to be very helpful for us. But we were journeying our way through the forest, and we encountered a specific patch actually in the forest. I know that he did a little bit of reflection on. You can definitely tell it meant a lot to him for sure. Do you remember this?
Yeah, meant a lot to him, but probably more PTSD. Just kind of like, all right, this is the part, like this is as far as I got last time, and then this is when I was separated from my traveling companions. And as had mentioned, one of the traveling companions were taken by a troll, and he was actually taken prisoner, obviously, and the events ensued and the party encountered him. So yeah, it's really interesting how things kind of come back together. And don't forget, Krothos was actually met by Thordane and Belbin earlier on.
It's very true.
At Takai Town. So like the people that you meet in the game, they're not necessarily just random encounters either. Like how you treat them from the very beginning can really help as far as what you're doing. Where Belbin and Thordane, they were sitting there and kind of talking with him, and kind of this burnt out personality of like, what do I do with my life? Oh, I got to go back and like I'm a merchant. I just travel and do things back and forth from Flawbridge. And he was kind of drinking, and Belbin and Thordane were just kind of like, oh yeah, we hear that, and relating. And then obviously the saving of them, and allowing Krothos to be able to trust them initially when they're like, okay, we're trying to break you free from here.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of growth and a lot of character development between him and the party too, that brought them to where they are, and even to the point where it's like they developed these relationships with the bandits. But they, still, followed through with like the laws of the land, particularly like that the bandits, they needed to seek trial and do justice, where he could have easily just released them to the world to do whatever they want. So
yeah, well, and then just by virtue of saving them and saving him and whatnot, like it made our job a little bit easier, especially when it came to talking to Nalgoric, the king, right, of Flomberge.
well, and isn't that crazy too? Because when you had first met him originally, and even like after you had saved him, like you thought he was nothing more than just like a gold draken, like a merchant traveler that went to and from. But the fact that he actually has a personal relationship with Nalgoric is like something that's like, yeah, you don't necessarily always know who you're talking with. So like,
So here's my question for you. What would have happened as far as this encounter? I guess maybe you don't have to spoil it if you don't want to. But what could have happened? What are some potential things that could have happened if we hadn't saved him? Say he ended up dying, or he ended up like we left on bad terms with him.
Right,
I guess.
right.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that could happen. One way to be able to do that is the whole encounter with Smoldrin. So maybe you could, as a party, and again, these are possibilities, maybe the party could, try to enter Flomberge, because again, Flomberge doesn't open its gates to just anybody, but specifically to deliver news of Smoldrin. So that's one way that could happen. You might be able to like find a way, like in like enough prominence in Takai Town to be able to gain access to Flomberge by being some kind of, communication between the two. Maybe not necessarily just to talk about Smoldran, but, you're working your way, and or you could even just as much, especially in the case of Eklos Eos, it could have been like, this is what we encountered at the Earth Pillar. We know that the Flame Pillar is here. So we need to talk, we need to figure things out, like there's an evil that's happening. So there's all kinds of ways that they could have made their way in, but the nice thing about having that relationship with Prothos is they didn't have to worry about making any crazy diplomacy. Like they already approached Nalgoric as, someone who is a guest, as opposed to like someone who's a stranger at his doorstep.
Well, and then that's the thing too, like we got straight to the point and straight to the business, because obviously we were trusted by him, and now Gorik's cool. I like him as like a character. Like he seems just, but he seems very kind as well. He seems like he's there's a lot of sense in him, and he's not corrupted by his position,
Well, one of the things that I would say is a really good way to explain him is he's a man who is driven by his purpose. And so like he has a job, he has a duty to not just Flomberge, but to the world, to safeguard the Flame Pillar. And so he's very duty driven. And I think, like he doesn't have time to like sit there and question people, especially when the people that he already trusts, has good terms with these people who bring news of Smoldran, people who bring news of the world, the Earth Pillar, that kind of stuff. And so like everything, like he doesn't need to sit there and just like investigate them and try to figure them out, because of obviously the party's relationship, where obviously that could look a little bit different. You might have a very different opinion of Nalgoric after, coming as a stranger, as opposed to like kind of already being a somewhat guest.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, and I think it's a perfect transition into his purpose, right? I mean, we had recovered a key, right, from our initial encounter with the Earth Pillar when we were there, and we have it, and we've had it for a while. But these keys, we found out, are incredibly important in overall, like when it comes to the different pillars. Like there's not only the Earth Pillar that you need a specific key for, which obviously Eklos Eos has now, but there's also the Flame Pillar key that he has. But there's other keys that we were sent at the end of this last session, sent on a quest to try to bring all the key bearers together. So do you want to explain a little bit more about that? I know he did, so you can go back and listen to the session to hear exactly what he said, but explain that a little bit more, just about these keys and what the purpose for them is.
So the keys don't necessarily have anything specifically to do with the pillar, but they're more of a kind of icon that belongs to the people who are to take care of each of the pillars. And so there are the 4 pillars. There's the water pillar, there's the sky pillar, there's the fire pillar, and then there's the earth pillar. And so 4 different races are the ones who actually take care of those. The Order of Amandalius were the ones who obviously completely slain by them, and actually now the new owners of that key are Eklos Eos, and so they're the ones that hold the Earth Pillar key. The obviously now Gorik, he's the one who's in charge of the Flame Pillar, and then the Feshen Fey Elves actually. King Farrand of the Feshen Fey Elves, he holds the Water Key, and then you have actually a human family that they're the ones who throughout generations of them are the ones that hold the pillar to, or the key to the Sky Pillar.
Yeah,
and essentially
the Monta Blair family. They sound pretentious.
Yeah, they could be. They could be viewed as that, but they have like long lived on the island, but they currently reside in Folden Rock. So they don't even live where the pillar that they have the key to, is. And so, yeah, it's interesting, but the whole purpose of those is so that one race doesn't gain complete control of essentially the representation of the power of life and death itself. Gotcha. And so what needs to happen in order to access that power, in order to bring people together, is obviously there hasn't been anything that's been disastrous, but each of those races need basically to come together, not only to just wield it, but to discover the mysteries of something that is beyond those who are mortals living in Everlast. And so that's something that like now Gorik himself is a little bit concerned with, especially hearing the news from the Earth Pillar. And the Flame Pillar itself, like there's been the power seems to be dwindling in it. And so there seems to be some kind of urgent need to be able to at least summon the holders of those keys to be able to talk about like what are the next steps going forward, and what basically they're going to be able to do. So
yeah, well, I mean, I just think it's a really good way, obviously, to set up our journey here on 4th, right? Like, we're going to be visiting Feshen Fey and Folden Rock, and we're going to be learning a little bit more about like cultures and areas of Everlast that Eklos Eos hasn't explored itself. So hopefully they learn a little bit more about each of those little nuances of each of the cultures, and hopefully we don't really screw up, I guess.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about this is, the fact that Eklos Eos, they're actually technically considered one of the guardians of like Everlast's creation at this point. Like they're the ones that are in charge of this key. And so like going back and like kind of like learning more of the lore about like the beginning, and like this duty has been thrust upon these adventurers, whether they wanted to or not. Like especially with the way that Eklos Eos encountered it, they just sailed to this place and they discovered like for themselves, like completely out of the blue, and this key itself now is within their hands, and now they have this great duty and this great responsibility. And so now Gorik is now charging them with the ability, like as one of the 4 carriers of one of the keys, to go and do something that is great. Because I think that's one thing with a lot of adventures, especially if you're creating a homebrew adventure. Obviously, if you're doing like an adventure like D&D or like Adventures of Middle Earth or whatever the case, something that's already written out for you, like they have a way for you to be able to like, okay, here's the next step of the story. But if you're creating like a homebrew, like that's sometimes like the most difficult part. It's like, okay, I've completed this. Now, how do I redirect everybody's attention to, this different goal, or like how does this previous goal tie into like the larger narrative, where it's like obviously Eklos Eos went into this and we're dealing with a baddie, the sorcerer, but little did they know there's something going on just generally throughout the entire Aishan archipelago with the different pillars, and just seeking out like different civilizations, like obviously as Dane, you had mentioned, gives them a purpose, it gives them a place to go. So that's something that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, but I think Eklos Eos is up to the task. At least I think they are. Yuki thinks they are. She believes in them. And we've done a lot at this point. I mean, we're level 7 at this point, and we've made our way through lots of different trials and tribulations, and I feel like we'll just have to see what the dice leaves us, as well as how if we could get ourselves out of the situation.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for session 10, or not session 10. Oh my gosh, session 16 on
Mhm.
December 10th, I should say. So,
Yep.
not this Saturday, but the Saturday after, so December 10th. So come join us. It's going to be really, really fun. We're going to be venturing off into going to these civilizations. Hopefully we can diplomacy really well. It's bound to be a great time, and you know what? Cheer us on as we go.
Hey,
We're
hey,
in this
hey.
together.
Before moving on,
Yeah.
you forgot one thing.
Did I?
How did last session end?
Last session ended. Didn't we say we had to go into the pillars? Did I miss something? All right. Explain.
And then there was a great loud noise and the earth shook.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. How could I forget about that? Yes. Great loud noise and the earth shook. So we might be getting into some shenanigans before that. Maybe we'll have to fight now Goric. It'll be good. Not now Goric.
Yeah, ooh, he becomes this big demon.
Maybe he'll...
You're level 7, final boss mode.
Maybe he is a little offbeat. I don't know. We'll see. He seems pretty chill. I don't know. It seems to me more like something like a Nazarene, something or other. So we'll have to see. But it'll be good. I'm excited for it. Maybe we still have more shenanigans in Flomberge to deal with, I guess, in the next session. But yes, I'm excited for it. And I know that...
Me too.
Since we only have the one session. Have we decided we only have the one session in December? Yeah.
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah. So the 10th, it's bound to be a crazy time. So come join us. It's a great way to finish off the year, and then we'll be kicking things off in the new year and just enjoying life and in getting to know Everlast a little bit more as a game and as a world, and getting to know Eklas Eos. And I guess that segues perfectly into the Christmas season, guys. It is officially the Christmas season. Advent has started, and you know what? We have some amazing sales going on at the merch store. So if you ever, aside from just being able to join us, again, we do stream on Twitch from, 7:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Saturdays. So whatever time that is for y'all, wherever in the world you are, that's the time that it streams live. However, we do upload to YouTube as well. Come and join us for that. So apart from just being there and enjoying the adventure along with us, following the Twitch channel as well as being a subscriber on YouTube, that really helps us. We have a Discord, we have all that kind of stuff. All of those are going to be linked about in the about the video description below. However, if you want to be able to support financially, we actually have some sweet sales going on right now. So all the way through the new year, we're going to be having up to 25% off all of our merch store and all of our items in there, meaning you can get some sweet Everlast merch. Not only Everlast, but just other Fantasy Forge merch. For example, I'm wearing just Fantasy Forge hoodie, all that kind of stuff, clothing, school supplies, everything you could think of, up to 25% off. So it's a great way to be able to do that, but all proceeds go towards the creation of Everlast as a game as well. So you're not only supporting the channel and getting some sweet merch in the meantime, but you're also supporting the creation of the game financially as well. So consider it. It will make a great Christmas gift for people, I know. And yeah, it's awesome. Buy it now so it gets in here in time for Christmas. So
additionally, you can support us by joining to the Patreon, especially for those who join us actually for the live streams of Everlast. There's two different levels that you can support us at. One, the $5 level, you can be essentially a changer of fate. And what that does is every month for the 2 sessions, and obviously there's only the 1 session here coming up for the month of December, but for our $5 a month, once per month during the actual live stream, you can provide hope, which is a reroll taking the highest number for someone, which actually has helped the party a lot in the past, from getting really cool items, from saving them from falling into summoning circles, all kinds of shenanigans. So it's really, really useful to be able to have. Or maybe it's not useful, but at the $5 a month level, you are supporting the game and the creation, and also helping to change the fates of those in our players in the official stream.
You're putting your stamp on Eklas Eos in a sense.
That's true, exactly. And then at the $10 level, you get 2 of those to use per month, and if you don't use them, you lose them. But you also gain, in that case, access to the stream, the old audio content from before the official stream of Everlast, and so lots of hours of fun content to be able to consume with that one. So lots of cool things to be able to look forward to if you subscribe at the $10 level. So
yeah, and you know what? The biggest and most important thing, though, is your prayers and your devotion to be here and just experience it along with us. But prayers more than anything for the creation of this game.
Absolutely.
It's been a long time coming, and we've been working really, really hard. In particularly, Kyle, it's been his full-time job for like the past 2 years or so, longer than that. But he's been really working on this game, and we're really excited to bring it to you guys, and we're really excited to make this game public, and you guys can enjoy such an amazing world and such an amazing game, essentially game that will bring many blessings into your own life. So the prayers are very much accepted and very much appreciated. So yeah, all right,
awesome. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap this sucker up for the month of November 2022?
No, I think that everyone needs to enjoy the Christmas season, enjoy your family, love your friends, love your family, and really take advantage of this wonderful winter season. And again, our motto here at Fantasy Forge Studios, get your day to 10 out of 10. You know, look at the bright side of things, and let's enjoy a wonderful Christmas season together.
And especially with you, Dane, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Yep.
And for those who are experiencing all that snow back home in America, enjoy it, because I'm not enjoying it here. So.
And those of you who are dying in the summer heat in the southern hemisphere, I apologize.
Yeah, it happens. We get that half a year too.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you all for joining. We really do appreciate it. Again, December 10th at 7:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Come and join us for session 16 of Everlast. The Adventures of Eklos Eos. It should be a great time. And yeah, stay tuned
May
for the...
May guide you.
Yeah,
each and every one of you.
Yeah, all right. Bye-bye, everyone.